5 albums from the 150 greatest albums made by women list. Now, I'm just going to pick 5 albums here that I think are worth your time because 150 albums is quite a lot, and not many people are really going to go through every album. So I'm just going to pick 5 that I think are worth your time and the best ones on the list. I'm not going to address the list specifically. I think it's a pretty decent list. There's a lot of albums I've not heard on there, I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of albums on there that are a bit, obvious choices. Some of them I'm not particularly that into, and I maybe wouldn't put them on a list of like the greatest of all time. And hilariously, there are some albums on there that are actually mostly made by men, so the list itself is pretty flawed from the get-go. I mean, Blondie, there are men in Blondie, there are men in the B-52s, so it's not strictly a women's list, so they probably could have done better there. But anyway, 5 picks from me.
Feel like hell, typical girls.
Gotta start with the Slits, the debut album Cut, which featured on this list, one of the best post-punk albums I've ever heard, from 1979, really underrated in terms of post-punk. They were an immense female punk band that, really had an interesting sound for their time, and very unique considering most punk bands at the time were male as well. So this was a really groundbreaking album, I think, and has one of the best cover songs I've ever heard. They do a really great cover song of I Heard It Through the Grapevine by Marvin Gaye. Love that cover song. They do a really good rendition of that and turn it into their own. Some really great female empowerment songs on here too. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a really unique experience, and I think this is one of the greatest punk albums I've heard.
I feel my heart sick of being in chains.
Tori Amos is an underrated singer-songwriter who put out some amazing music in the 90s, particularly her debut album Little Earthquakes. This album for me is a really well-made piano rock album. I think the Crucify track, the opening track Crucify, is just absolutely wonderful. I love that song so much, and the rest of the album too. I think if you're a fan of Fiona Apple or any other like female piano singer-songwriters of today, like even a bit of PJ Harvey and Julia Holter, all those kind of artists, you should definitely check out Tori Amos. She doesn't get referenced a lot, and I was really happy to see her on this list because I rarely see anyone give her any praise, but she deserves a lot more praise than she gets.
So remember when we were driving in your...
Tracy Chapman, you've likely heard Fast Car by Tracy Chapman, one of the best songs I think has ever been made. Absolutely love that song. She's an amazing acoustic guitar player that dabbles into other unique sounds too, like obviously on this debut album it was really quite an interesting album from the 80s, because not a lot of 80s music went in this direction, and I think that Tracy Chapman demonstrated some interesting sounds and singer-songwriter songs on this album. I think it's definitely worth your time too.
To be ending with somewhere to start. No.
Sade's Diamond Life is an amazing sophisti-pop album. It's so smooth, it's so gentle and whispery. It's just a well-made, sophisticated album that I absolutely love. I love this style of music. There's a lot of bands like this that do this now. Like Rye is a band that does this sound too, and a few others today that have kind of been influenced from this 80s sound. But this is a really well-made album. Very smooth. It's just so laid back. Yeah, absolutely think she's an underrated singer-songwriter too. And finally, I've got to end on one of my favourite albums ever made, Patti Smith's Horses. Absolutely love this album. Again, it's another great, early punk album from 1976, I believe, kind of predecessor to like some of the greats that we know today, like The Clash and Sex Pistols and the Ramones. But this was around the time like Iggy Pop was making great music too. So this was kind of like the female equivalent to Iggy Pop, I think. There was some excellent tracks on here, like the opening track Gloria. She just whelps on this song, and oh man, the vocal styles that she manages to muster up are just insane. I absolutely love it. She's really experimental. There's a really good reggae sounding track on here too, and she does an amazing cover of The Who's My Generation. And yeah, Patti Smith, just an absolute legend. Her lyricism is fantastic too. She's been known to make memoirs and poetry, so that's all worth checking out as well. But this debut album, Horses, is incredible. So yeah, they're the five albums that I've picked from this list. Of course, there are loads of albums on there that are absolutely great, but some of them actually I'm planning on doing classic reviews on. So I'm going to wait to talk about those when I eventually make those classic reviews. So yeah, this was a decent list made by NPR. I think it was pretty good. A lot of stuff I don't know on there, probably I wouldn't like, but maybe I'll check it out as well. But definitely check out the five that I mentioned here because these are great. And have a good day.